Morning, everybody. I want to do kind of a intermediate video between the studies I'm doing and a little update. This is a Saturday morning, and just right now the comments on the political stuff are not intended. They're not. It's intended for us to see, to learn. When the media is in, I'm going to do a little bit of the Bible in a minute, and my phone's almost dead. But when the media was kind of in a little bit of a tailspin, which the public saw on election night and all, they were like in panic mode and upset and all, and that's normally when they slip and speak truth. Hillary Kramer, okay? She's not a big commentator on any of this, but she's a financial lady. I'm not sure if she's related to Jim Cramer, the crazy guy on the... I used to watch Jim Cramer. But she's a financial lady. And, of course, the stocks are going way up more than they should. But what she said, I think it slipped, she said, it depends on what Mr. Trump does. She says, because right now, our economy, this is what she said, the financial lady, she said, it's running on printed money. This is why there's such a fear in the Dow and in the stocks whenever Janet Yellen and the Federal Reserve just talk about raising interest rates just a little bit, and the stock falls. But the reason is the economy, like this woman said, is running on printed money, which is a tremendous danger. And it's a tremendous bubble. And even Donald Trump, President-elect Trump, during the campaign, said that. He spoke a lot of things that were true that traditionally you don't speak. But one of them he said was that. It was in the debate with Hillary Clinton. And he even said the Federal Reserve is more politicized even than you, Mrs. Clinton, because of that reason. That in itself, those who don't look at all that, that simply means we're in a huge bubble and we're in a danger zone. Both Michael Moore, the liberal, and Chris Matthews from MSNBC, who's also very liberal, both of them came out in the last few days and basically tried to fight back the media narrative that the people that elected Trump are racists and Klansmen and KKK. Listen. Michael Moore and Chris Matthews had to come out and say, Michael Moore said, look, many of the people in the Rust Belt and that part of our country that the states switched to Trump, and they're normally Democratic, it says many of them simply lost their jobs because of NAFTA jobs, many of the things that Trump spoke on. And those of you that were Bernie Sanders supporters, and those of you that are sincerely progressives or liberals, in this campaign, Donald Trump had views and said things that were very progressive and very liberal. And for a Republican nominee to win on that platform, those of you that were Bernie Sanders supporters, you will get much more of what you wanted. But in the fact that Trump got in and was elected the way he was, than if Hillary Clinton got in. Because Hillary Clinton is very much a establishment, sort of almost Republican-type Democrat. That's why a lot of people supported her. She was not the Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders type progressive. And in the campaign between Trump and Hillary, Trump was much more progressive. He was anti-trade, some people, because he was against NAFTA and these things. Many of the people sincerely voted for him based on that. A few days right before the election, President Obama campaigned more for a nominee while being president than any other president campaigned for a nominee. Now, I understand why he did that, because his legacy was at stake and all. But he actually brought up in the last week of the campaign that Trump supporters, some of them are KKK and things of that nature. That was a huge mistake for him to have done that. Now all the statements everyone is making, I think, are fine. Hillary was very good in her you know, concession speech. President Obama had a meeting with Trump. I think they're all doing the responsible thing at this moment. But the media is still being deceptive because one of Trump's big platforms was, I'm going to repeal and replace Obamacare. Simply meaning the system that was set up, and anybody that really looked at the Obamacare from the beginning would know that that was not going to work. John, if you want, don't you want universal health care? I do. But the way it was set up, it wasn't going to work because it allowed the insurance industries, which are for-profit corporations, it allowed them, by law, you had to buy insurance either from the government market or from free, and there were no restraints on that. It wasn't going to work, okay? And in the beginning, Howard Dean and others knew that it wasn't going to work, but the Democrats in the beginning of the Obama administration pushed that through. There was not a single Republican voter for it, and it wasn't working, okay? So what did the media say? Yesterday, they're saying Trump has already gone back on his promise. He's not going to repeal parts of Obamacare. And then I watched the little clip. It's going to be an interview that Trump did, I think, with 60 Minutes. It's not what he said. He said, look, we're going to repeal it, but there are parts of Obamacare, which is basically called health insurance, that we're obviously going to do. It would be like if the media said, Mr. Trump is going to have health care. He's going to get rid of Obamacare, but he's still going to have, quote, health care, which of course he was going to do. And the Ryan plan, of course. And it would be like the media saying, oh, Trump said he'd repeal Obamacare, therefore, any effort by Mr. Trump and the Republicans to provide health care, he's now a hypocrite because he said he'd repeal it. See how deceptive that is? They asked him in the interview that's coming up, they said, what about the people that have pre-existing conditions? Are you going to permit them to still have insurance? And he said, yes, I think that's something good, and we're going to keep that after we repeal the system. It's just semantics. The system, the way Obamacare was set up, I believe they'll repeal that part by part, piece by piece. But there's obviously going to still be health care, and you wouldn't call that he went back on his word, okay? But that's how they portrayed it. So they're still being divisive in that. And I'm going to talk about Revelation in a minute. And the other one thing I wanted to mention, I could do the Benghazi person I heard on the news. One of our men in Benghazi, I can't explain all now, but I heard him on the radio news, and he explained that during the debacle in Libya, Benghazi, where Ambassador Stevens was killed, he said the troops, the security that actually saved the ones that were saved and rescued, he said they were Gaddafi loyalists. We had already backed Gaddafi's murder at that point. And the militias who we hired for security were the ones who killed our ambassador. And from the Benghazi soldier I heard on the radio yesterday, he said it was actually the Gaddafi loyalists, security, who saved them after the U.S. backed the murder of Gaddafi. Okay, let me do a little bit of, I was going to say how the media is not covering the atrocities in Mosul, which are on the Shia side, which are the Iraqi troops who we support, but they're covering the atrocities that the Sunnis are doing. Here's the problem. We shouldn't be backing any army that's executing civilians, which the Iraqi army has done this past week. Executed civilians and drug them through the streets, and those tanks are now flying our flags because they were flying Sunni flag or Shia flags. See, we're involved in a sectarian thing over there, and it's wrong for us to do that. Now, before my phone dies, Revelation I've been reading. Of course, I'm doing the study on Jonah, which I'm going to finish. And I just want to tie some things together. I read Matthew 1 last night, the lineage of Jesus Christ, the genealogy, how he comes from King David, the son of Jesse. So this whole story of David in the book of Samuel, it's all of that history was a progressive timeline for the coming of the Messiah. That God made promises to men in the Old Testament, in the history of Israel, and these promises to King David, to Abraham, they were all progressive coming to the time of Christ. And so that's what we're seeing when we do the history of Samuel. I don't want you to just see it as an interesting, particularly military history, because we're going to read of great battles that King David has. And the kingdom that Jesus sets up and establishes, which is presently established, is a nonviolent one. So we don't want to just read it as like, quote, the documentaries on the Civil War or things. Oftentimes we glorify war and violence, and that's not the intent. So as we read through Samuel, what we're seeing is God establishing David. I'm going to link this into the Jonah and Samuel studies right in between that time together. But ultimately we're going to see God make promises to King David that his son Solomon will build the temple. And these are dual prophecies, meaning some of these promises to David that your son will build the temple. Your son will sit on the throne forever. Initially, they understood these prophecies as just speaking to them at that historical point in Old Testament history. And then we find out from the mouth of Peter in the book of Acts that God was speaking about Jesus, that a son would sit on the throne, and his resurrection and ascension was Jesus on the throne. Now, I'm reading Revelation. I'm not teaching it, but if you go through, I did 4 chapters in the last few days, and John is in the Spirit on the Lord's day. And there's this door that's open in heaven, and he heard, as it were, a voice of a trumpet speaking. Paul says in Thessalonians that the Lord himself will descend from heaven with the shout, with the voice of the archangel, and with the trump of God. And the dead in Christ will rise first. And we which are alive and remain will be caught up together with the Lord to meet the Lord in the air. So John is seeing this voice of a trumpet. And he says there's this door that was opened in heaven. Come up, John. And this was after the 2 chapters where Jesus, we see, he's with the 7 stars in his right hand, which are the messengers of the churches. You're seeing the leadership of the church. You're seeing the spirits of God. You're seeing a kingdom where both people and angels and the Spirit of God and us and angels as well, because angels are called ministering spirits. So what you're seeing is this kingdom. John is seeing this, where the word of the Lord is going forth, where the people of God are going forth. It's an unstoppable revolution. ISIS, there were some YouTube videos that they were discussing on the news, how as we're going into Mosul, that the leader of ISIS, the particular guy that was in Mosul, they're on YouTube and all, and they're saying, it's now time to fight. Fight the infidels. Fight them to the death. Many of the young people that have become radicalized, I've never watched any of those videos, except clips from if another news show shows anything. They've tapped into something. I do not agree or support ISIS. They've tapped in to the younger generation in that part of the world that is now seeing themselves as a David against a Goliath. They're seeing a movement, and they're dying for it in their own distorted view. But that's what they tapped into. And there's actual ongoing battles that the U.S. and various alliances are fighting them, and some of those battles they are winning. Some of them, which is astounding. And these younger kids that are becoming radicalized because their grievances, they said, no one, this is the only solution that's in their minds. Violence is the only solution, which to us, we also think the same, and we don't understand that. So they tapped into a revolution. That's why this war with ISIS will not be won by just killing particular groups of radicalized people. It's an ideology. Okay, so John sees this vision, and then the promises are made to those who overcome and to the churches. And the churches, Jesus is in the midst of these candlesticks, these things, if you will, that hold oil and burn like lamps. Okay? So Jesus now is in the midst of these lamps. Us, the church, who the Spirit of God flows through us like a fire, like a light. And I just quoted the verse, who makes his ministers flames of fire. And so this kingdom now, Jonah is seeing on the island of Patmos, having this vision. It's a supernatural thing. And to those who overcome, I will give to eat of the tree of life, which is in the midst of the garden. To those who overcome, I will give him a white stone, and upon the stone a new name written, which no man knows but he himself. Look, the scripture says, a gift is like a precious stone in the eyes of the Lord. Wherever it turns, it prospers. John the Apostle will say, who wrote Revelation, he says, therefore the world knoweth us not, because it knew him not. Beloved, now are we the sons of God, and it doth not yet appear what we shall be. But we know that when he shall appear, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. Therefore the world knoweth us not, because it knew him not. So now John is seeing this in this vision, that this white stone was given, this particular gift. And it says, no man on the stone a new name, a new identity. When you function in your gift, people don't see you. They see a different you. They see the stone that the new name is on. Because the candlesticks, Jesus said, when you come into a room, and the room is lit by a light, then it reveals, it shows the things in that room, the wonderful gifts in God's kingdom. But you're not attracted. You don't stare at the light bulb. Look at that light bulb. You see what it illuminates. And so that's what we are in the kingdom. You don't stare at the chandelier, though it might be pretty. You're going to look at all the things that gift is unfolding. And so now, and I like chapter, and he that overcomes, I'll give to eat of the hidden manna, which was that bread of life, which was in the Ark of the Covenant. But it's Christ, the bread of life. In John 6, Moses did not give you that bread, the manna. I'm the bread. He says that your fathers ate that manna and they're dead. They're dead. And he says, if you eat of this, if you eat of me, which is a key Catholic Eucharistic chapter, but he's saying, I'm the bread of life. Okay, and then in chapter 4, there's this throne, because John went in, he went through the door, he was in the Spirit. In Matthew 1, which I read last night, it's interesting, because Mary, the mother of Jesus, gets pregnant, and Joseph is thinking, I'm going to put her away privately. I'm not going to make a big public thing that the engagement is off, but obviously my wife is pregnant, so she was unfaithful, and that's what Joseph thought. And then what happens? The angel of the Lord appears to Joseph in a dream and says, don't be afraid to take unto you Mary your wife. The child is conceived by the Holy Spirit. Joseph wakes up and obeys what the angel told him in a dream. All of my scholars, all of my theologians who like all of the stuff we do, don't ever forget that. Paul has a dream that some man from Macedonia says, come. and he wakes up and says, surely this was the mission from God for today. Don't ever discount the supernatural aspect of the kingdom. As much as we like to engage in intellectual stuff, particularly apologetics to combat the intellectuals who've used their mind to deny God, who use the stupidity of their mind to save them. Dark matter. Now it's the biggest, according to them, it's the most matter ever. 97% of all the matter in the whole universe, we not only do not see it, but it's still undetected. But yet look at everything that you could see. Oh, never mind that. The intellectuals. No, it's dark matter. And why are they going down that road? Because ultimately they want to say there's no design. So all the beautiful matter we see, the creation of God, and the end of chapter 4 it says, you are worthy to receive honor, glory, and dominion, for you have created all things, and for your pleasure they are and were created. And Paul says in Romans, because they deny the creation of God, that God has made it all, therefore God gave them up to a reprobate mind, because the things of him are clearly seen from the foundation of the world, even his eternal power and Godhead. The psalmist David says, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. So in Revelation, we're actually seeing a lot of these, and this is also part of Jewish, like, poetic praise, where you see these things. It's the God who made the oceans and all the fish and all the sea. And not only is that true historically, but that's a type of praise when you see that, okay? Even in the Jewish history, that he's the one who made it. He's the Most High. So in Revelation, John sees this throne room, and this is important. He sees one sitting on the throne. And when I taught Hebrews, being seated has theological implications, meaning those who are seated, there's a verse I have here. It says, the Lord rested the seventh day from all his works and was refreshed. Isn't that amazing? God was refreshed. So seated, which I taught in Hebrew, simply means the law is complete. You're now in grace. That's what that means. Because there are 24 elders. So John sees this leadership, not only of the church, but also of the nation of Israel. The 12 elders, if you will, and the 12 tribes, 12 apostles' tribes. So what are we seeing? We're seeing not only, quote, Christendom, we're seeing how all authority in all nations is coming from God. Therefore, it's required for all people to do justice, particularly those that are in positions of authority. But these elders are also seated. And the scripture says, sit thou at my right hand until I make thine enemies thy footstool. And that's a promise to us as well. That's a prophecy of Jesus. It's a promise to us. So if you want to rule in the kingdom, you sit in grace. It says a king that sits on the throne of judgment scatters away all evil. I got it up there. All evil with his eyes. So if you want to exercise authority in the kingdom, you find that place where you're seated. Okay? And there are times where you're going to be alone with God. Remember what I quoted, John. It says, therefore the world knoweth us not, because it knew him not. The days will come when you will desire to see one of the days of the Son of Man, and you will not see it. A lot of ministry in our day is we want to be maybe on a stage. We want to be. Let me ask you this, pastors. You have the capability through a simple thing like this, of the video, YouTube, to go in all the world. Why aren't you all doing it? Okay. Or is it more inspiring to you to know that maybe you're preaching to 100 people in a room or 1,000 in a room? Could you walk with that? There were times where Jesus was alone. He says, but these things I'm communicating, Father, these seeds I'm planting, I'm sowing, the great seed sower. He says, I have faith in the Father that the word of the Lord is going to cover the earth as the waters cover the sea. So anybody, anyone watching these videos, you can do every single thing you see me do. You could write commentaries, communicate them, get them out. Be seated. Just understand that the word of the Lord's going out. You don't have to always have people. Jesus said the people in his day were like children sitting in the marketplaces, saying, pipe to us, do this, or give us a funeral song, or make us. They were looking for response. Paul says, in the end times, false teachers are going to come, and we're going to listen to them because we have itching ears. We want the Bible teaching to simply be something that makes us feel good. Okay, so you're seated with him, and that's where you're going to have authority in the kingdom. And then Jonah. We'll finish Jonah in a day or two, but Jonah's whole story is pointing to Jesus. So when he stood in the Gospels and he said, a wicked and adulterous generation seeks after a sign, and there shall no sign be given but the sign of the prophet Jonas. For as Jonah was in the belly of the whale 3 days and 3 nights, so will the Son of Man be in the heart of the earth. And Jesus said to that generation he was talking to, he said, that's going to be your sign. You're all looking for a sign. I'm healing people all around, raising the dead, and you're still looking for signs. Your eyes are so blind. He says, and here's the biggie. I'm going to come out of the grave. And what are you going to do with that one? And the Gospels testify that they made up a story. Let's make up a story that his disciples stole him. Meaning they knew. You see, they knew.